Well, after the UFC is done in the Apex, you can jump on UFC Fight Pass this Saturday night for some world-class boxing. And that word world-class gets thrown around a lot in combat sports. They usually mean, oh, they're pretty good. No, elite level, world-class boxing is headed your way live on UFC Fight Pass. It is Hollywood Fight Nights, brought to you by the newly inducted member of the National Boxing Hall of Fame, Tom Loeffler. We'd expect nothing less from you at this point, Tom, than world-class boxing, and we get it Saturday.
It was a big honor, TJ. I've been in the boxing business for 33 years, and to have that honor bestowed on me means a lot. All the fighters I've worked with over the years, starting with Kevin Kelly, who was the WBC featherweight champion back in 1992. We got him his title shot, and he became champion. And then just over the years, getting Shane Mosley his world title fight when nobody wanted to fight him, working with Triple G when nobody knew who he was over here in the U.S., and then making him into a global star. Naturally, the Klitschko brothers. I mean, the list kind of goes on, but we're really excited about the cooperation with UFC Fight Pass and developing new stars. I've worked with a lot of legendary champions and names, and now guys like Callum Walsh or Sergey Lipinov, Omar Trinidad. When you say world class, those guys are right there, all world class fighters.
No, absolutely. Let's talk about Sergey. He's in the main event coming up on Saturday night. I think it's a real treat for myself personally, but also Fight Pass and just fans of the platform that are true boxing fans. Again, Sergey's a guy that's been at the very clear, the tippy top, interim world champion, a guy that, is someone that has gotten there, and I think there's still a long road in front of him. Being that he's on Fight Pass, this isn't like a step back for him. I think this is a real treat for him to sort of show his skills again on a platform that didn't necessarily make Sir High, but he shined before he got to the tippy top there as well.
Absolutely. We kept him busy, kept him active, put him in some good matchups on Fight Pass. This will be his first fight. This is a treat for the Los Angeles fans. He trains here. He lives and trains in Los Angeles. But last year he fought twice in Las Vegas and once in Saudi Arabia. And you can make the argument if most people thought that he beat Virgil Ortiz, dropping him twice in 12 rounds. So if you feel like he won that fight, you can make the argument that he's the best in the division. It was a great fight for both fighters. It was a candidate for fight of the year. Having Sergey now back on headlining UFC Fight Pass at Commerce Casino, it's going to be a big treat for the boxing fans that watched him on the road last year, and now they can see him back in his adopted hometown of Los Angeles.
How risky is this for Sirhai? Because again, he's an elite level, top shelf boxer who I think, Tom, maybe I'm wrong, but I would feel like there's actually a lot of pressure on him fighting on this stage because he's got a lot to lose, and opponents they got to be licking the chops to try to make a name off Surrey for themselves.
He's the number one mandatory challenger for the WBC world champion. So there is a lot at risk. There is a lot to lose. Michael Fox is coming to win. He's a tall, awkward southpaw fighter, but it's going to be a great matchup for the fans. And this is what, Sergey understands, that he's got to stay active. Manny wants him to stay active, and this is the perfect spot for him to stay active. And like I said, he's the mandatory challenger now. So we'll see him fighting for a world title again coming up very soon. And in the meantime, it's a great fight, great matchup, a great show. When you can have Sergey Boachuk, number one in the world, and Omar Trinidad, who's rated number two in the world, on the same show,
Right.
along with Mizuki Heruta, who is the world champion.
Yeah.
It doesn't get much better than that. TJ, it's funny. Every card I say, oh, this is a good card. This might be one of our best cards. But I'd have to say this is really stands out in terms of the value for the fans.
Called about 20 of your events over the last 2 years and some change. And I will say, even when it doesn't look good on paper, it ends up, well, it's never not look good on paper, but even when you're maybe not expecting a sort of all-timer sort of classic fight of the year candidate, we end up getting them. A lot of times they're on the undercard even too. Don't get me wrong, the main events deliver, but we always talk about the future of boxing, Tom, and the future is very bright with what 360 is doing. But sometimes you get it in fights that you don't even necessarily expect it to. Guys that are, young in their career, 4-0, taking on a guy that might have a little bit more experience than them. And then all of a sudden you see that 4-0 kid tested. And we're talking about the top of the card, obviously, but like there are secret hidden gems throughout these Hollywood Fight Night cards. So I would say to anybody that's going to tune in on Saturday, tune in early. Don't miss a fight. It starts with some prelims and all that fun business. Let's get back to the top of the card, though. You mentioned Omar Trinidad, the king of LA. It's in Commerce, his backyard here in Southern California. Are there even tickets left? Can people still buy tickets? Because with Omar on the card, a sellout, it seems like it's an inevitable.
Inevitable. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Inevitability? That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. I don't know if that's a word.
That's a word. And Omar is the king of LA. He gets a huge fan base coming out to support him. Always puts on a great show, never in a boring fight. We saw some of the fights recently, high profile names that just didn't deliver for the fans. And that's why I got to give credit to Charles Boziker. You mentioned, some of the undercard fights might steal the show. But he does a great job matching the fights from the main event, co-main event, all the way down to the bottom. And they're very fan-friendly fights. Omar is, like I said, he's a big fan favorite, number 2 in the world. He won a big eliminator fight against Sosa from Argentina, so that propelled him to number 2. And he's a showman. He always loves the fans that are coming out to support him, and he wants to put on a show.
In a show he puts on, he has humble origins from Boyle Heights. Boxed when he was young, took some time off, came back, seems to be in his prime in a lot of ways, and he still has a lot of room to grow, but he's showcasing that talent. The thing that I like about Omar the most, Tom, is he has knockout power from round 1 to round 10, and I'm guessing even beyond that, should he be put in a 12-round fight.
He's an exciting fighter for sure, and he deserves all the credit with his ratings. But he wants to become a world champion, and as we mentioned with Sergey Bochuk, this is a dangerous fight for him too. And, it's one of those fine lines. You need to stay active. You need to keep being in competitive fights, but then you also want to definitely shoot for a world title, and that's what we're planning for Omar as well. All this generation fighters that we're bringing up right now, not only are they good in the ring, very skilled in the ring, but they're good personalities. Sergey Bochuk, the backstory for Sergey, going back to Ukraine to renew his visa and then being stuck in Ukraine while while Putin invaded his country. And then he was there for about 4 months until we can officially get him out to get him to Poland. And then he was in Poland for a month. And then he came back here. So he's fighting with a vigor, not only for himself, his career. He has a new baby daughter, and for his country. So, Sergey puts on a great show. Omar Trinidad, like you said, from humble beginnings. These are all very likable guys. Being in the sport as long as I have been, not only do they need to be talented fighter, but they need to have good characters in order for me to really invest the time and energy and get excited by working with a fighter. And these guys really are at the top of that list.
Hollywood Fight Nights has become one of the best, if not the best, up and coming boxing series here in the United States. And I think even across the world, when you look at it for, creating stars, establishing them, and then, bolstering them up to the brightest lights in boxing. I think one key factor to that, and you talked about, Omar wanting to stay active, is the activity rate of these 360 athletes, because you're not afraid to get a guy 4 or even 5 fights in a year, if that's even possible. I'm curious, do you think, I mean, bringing it back to MMA a little bit, it's UFC Fight Pass after all, do you feel boxers should be trying to compete 4 or 5 times in a year? Because a lot of hungry up and coming MMA fighters, they want to try to get as many fights as they can, but I feel in boxing, you seem to be one of the few promoters that are trying to get these guys as many fights possible in a single calendar.
Well, that's a great thing about the partnership. What Dana's opened the door for us with UFC Fight Pass is the activity. We have 12 shows scheduled this year. When you're working with a young fighter that's first starting out, I think activity is key, because that's the only way you can learn is fighting in the ring. I mean, you can be sparring and training and everything, but once you're in the ring under the lights and the fans cheering you on, Umar Jambekov, who also has a great story, he's from Vienna, Austria, trains at the Wildcard Gym with Marvin Samodio. He fought 6 times for us. I think it was last year he fought 6 times. So he was very, very active. And he's breaking in now. He's knocking on the top 10 ratings himself. So Umar's going to be on the June 21 show at Chumash. But, the activity is key. And the great thing about, as I mentioned, the partnership with UFC Fight Pass is we have the dates all planned out ahead of time. Whether we went to Madison Square Garden for St. Patrick's Day, which has a great Irish crowd out there. You were there, and also, we went to Dublin for Callum Walsh and Boston, wherever it was. We can plan these out strategically to really build not only the ratings on Fight Pass, but to build each fighter's career and their following, and that's what we're excited about for this event.
Yeah, it's all about continuity, I think, from show to show. And that's one thing that's exciting about 360 is we go into an event and we already know what the next date is, what the main event is. It's appointment viewing, I think, for fans that are product or for fans of the product. And we'll talk about the next show in a moment, but we should talk about a world championship fight that we have on this card. We're talking about characters. There are none more colorful than Mizuki Heruta. Tell me how you and Mizuki got linked up, because it's her second fight here in Southern California. She's from Japan, a world champion. It's pretty exciting to have her on this stage here in SoCal.
We're very excited to be working with Mizuki. I have a very good relationship with Manny Robles. Manny Robles trains Sergey Boachuk, also trains Lupita Medina, who's on the show too. We'll get to her in a minute. But Mizuki, like you said, very colorful. She really looks like a real life anime character from Japan. I'm really excited about her. She fought on our show one time, defended her title. I believe that was in January or February, and then now she's coming back a second time. And the fan reaction, my prediction for Mizuki is she's going to be the next Japanese sports star. She's a huge fan of what Otani's doing here for the Dodgers. And we saw what Inoue, the monster, is doing from Japan. And then also I worked with Kazuto Ioka. So I'm familiar with Japanese boxing, and we took Triple G over there to Saitama when he fought Murata over there in Japan. So they're very passionate fans, a great fan base, especially fighting here in Los Angeles, like I mentioned, where the Dodgers have a huge Japanese fan base. And I really think that seeing the reaction, a lot of people didn't know what to expect. It was like, oh, a female champion, world champion from Japan. Now and then they saw her ring entrance, they saw her
Yeah.
hair, they saw the whole character, especially also at the weigh-in. And now they know what to expect. They're looking forward to seeing her back in the ring. She's actually in a very tough fight. She's making her mandatory title defense against Carla Marino from Argentina, who has a lot more professional fights than Mizuki. And this will be a banger. This will be a great fight. And she's kind of like the female version of Omar Trinidad, where she's just throwing punches and wants to put on a show for the fans.
Looking at Mizuki, it's hard to believe that big of a personality can fit in a 115-pound woman. But it definitely comes out, and we'll see her coming up this Saturday night at Hollywood Fight Nights. You mentioned, women's boxing. You've always carved out a spot for the ladies, and one prospect we've seen in the past, she's back. Guadalupe Medina, Lupita's back. She's also someone who has a very bright future, and I think she could turn out to, being one of the pillars of women's boxing as we move forward here with the ladies starting to bolster themselves with characters. And, the sport's a lot more than Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. No offense to those ladies. They're phenomenal. But we're starting to see, I think, a swell of young and up and coming talent that will try to carry the women's side of the sport into the future.
I think women's boxing is definitely on the rise. And when you do have personalities like Mizuki, like Lupita, she's on the undercard, but she's looking to steal the show. When she posts on social media, or when she does a weigh-in, she really gets a lot of attention from fans, worldwide attention. And that's a great thing about UFC Fight Pass and the support of the UFC social media. It's really, and I can't give Dana enough credit for all the support that he's shown us, but when you get the UFC publicity and social media machine behind what we're doing on the boxing side, it's a tremendous cross promotion. And Callum Walsh has seen that. He's a boxer, but he's probably better known by MMA fans because of all the attention that Dana's giving him and that he's getting on the UFC social media. And Lupita Medina is in that same line where she's getting so much attention now from all the posts that we're doing. She's very, very marketable, fluent in Spanish, and definitely is looking to steal the show as well.
I will say this about Dana and the UFC as a whole. I don't think the UFC can make stars. I really don't. And that might sound like a hot take, but I think the UFC provides the platform, and it's up to the stars to prove themselves and make themselves. And yes, you need the UFC's platform if you want to be, among the elite level combat sports athletes these days. But it still comes down to the fighters and what they do with that opportunity. And that's one thing that I think we see time and time again. The athletes on these 360 shows, they know they're under some bright lights and they want to shine in them time and time again. And there's many stars on this upcoming HFN this Saturday night. So tune in immediately, not maybe immediately, but the UFC runs earlier in the day. And we're just going to keep that combat sports day going with some boxing here on Saturday. So you mentioned Callum. I want to talk about Callum. His next fight coming up in July at Chumash. He takes on Elias Espadas. Espadas was just in action on the last 360 card in the main event against Sadruddin Akhmedov. Very close fight, ends in a draw. Talking to Espadas, he said that, this is my biggest fight of my career in the sense that if I beat Akhmedov, it's going to propel him to big opportunities. He didn't beat him. More importantly, he didn't lose. And sure enough, he finds himself in a huge opportunity, as does Callum Walsh. I can't recall a fight recently that got me so excited when I saw the announcement. And I didn't expect it to come from the world of boxing, Tom. I'm really excited about Callum Walsh and Elias Espadas.
It's actually going back to the activity. It's actually June 21
Oh,
at
June,
Chumash.
yeah, not July. Sorry.
At Chumash Casino. Beautiful Santinez Valley with Chumash Casino up there. June 21, and that is a great fight. The fight with Sadruddin Akhmedov. He was undefeated, 15-0 versus Elias Espadas, and Elias just started training with Manny Robles this year, so this was his first fight. And you see the leaps and bounds that he's made, and we figured, look, he gave Sadruddin all that he wanted as an undefeated fighter, 15-0. Callum's 13-0 with 11 knockouts, trained by Freddie Roach out of the wild card boxing gym. So let's put them together. They put on an exciting fight. We're sure that Espadas and Callum Malch are going to put on a great fight, and that's also live on UFC Fight Pass from the Chumash Casino.
Callum's progression has been under these UFC Fight Pass spotlights since pretty much jump. It seems almost unfair to Callum because we keep talking about step up in competition, toughest guy he's fought, yada yada yada. When we kind of sell that point more, he gets him out of there even quicker than he did the last guy. It feels like lately. So are we starting to see Callum really hit his stride? Like obviously working with Freddie Roach, there's still a lot more to improve, but I feel the last 2-3 fights that we've seen from Callum, he's just been a different guy than he was earlier in his career.
He just turned 24. It's funny because the day I brought him up to Las Vegas to meet with Dana was actually his first birthday. He turned 21 in Las Vegas. Imagine a better place for turning 21, although he wasn't hanging out. We flew back that night, so he wasn't in the casinos or anything. But that day will stand out to me where I introduced him to Dana. Dana immediately saw that Irish swagger, the charisma, shades of Conor McGregor. But on the boxing side, Callum's very charismatic. He had this stamp of approval from Freddie Roach, who Dana has known for a long time, and he gave us the green light for UFC Fight Pass dates. And he was 1-0 at the time. He made his pro debut on one of our earlier shows, and ever since then, he's headlined UFC Fight Pass. I don't know another fighter that's headlined every fight since the pro debut. Starting from the second fight on, and leaps and bounds. Like you said, we keep putting him in tougher competition, in bigger platforms. And when he fought Ranowski in Dublin, a lot of times I've seen a lot of fighters, hometown fighters, carrying the promotion and carrying the weight of the publicity on their shoulders and underperforming. We saw that with Anthony Joshua the first time he fought at Madison Square Garden, and he carried the whole promotion. Had a last-minute change of opponent, and Andy Ruiz, sure enough, was able to stop him. So there was a lot of pressure for fighters coming home, and that's what happened with Callum coming home to Ireland with Dublin, and he had one of his best performances against a guy who had never been stopped before, Ranowski, a great record that he had, and then he fought Dean Sutherland going back to Madison Square Garden, 19-1. I thought it'd be a boxing match. Dean Sutherland's a great boxer from Europe. Callum was able to get him out of there in one round. It seems like within the last 6 months to a year, he's really kind of come into his man strength. Being 24 years old, learning under the tutelage of Freddie Roach, who's famously known of training another big punching southpaw, Manny Pacquiao. So you got a bigger version of Manny Pacquiao in Callum Walsh. Big power, big showman, and every time he gets in the ring, it's fireworks. So we're excited about that. And to fight Espadas, who just went to a draw against Saturday Nurmagomedov, who was 15-0, that's going to be a great matchup, and we're really excited for that fight.
Yeah, Callum's definitely a star coming into his own, 24 years old. There are a lot of things, Tom, he can do that I can't do, but until he hits 25, I can say that I can do something that he can't, and that's rent a car. And I'm going to hold on to that as long as I can. But very excited to get up to Chumash and see him fight coming up here in June. But again, Saturday night, immediately or a little bit after the UFC wraps up, inside the Apex, get over to Fight Pass and check out some world-class boxing from a world-class guy, the Hall of Famer, Tom Loeffler. Appreciate your time, sir, and we'll see you Saturday.
Great. Thank you, TJ. Great to talk to you. And yeah, we'll see you Saturday night. We'll see you at the weigh-ins on Friday, actually.
That's true. I'll be there.